A warm welcome to all to this special talk on Vedantic view of death in light of Sri Aurobindo and the Mother. I'm thankful for this opportunity to be the host for this program. My name is Sushant Singh, and I'm currently working as Assistant Professor of Yoga at Oro University, Surat. I had the privilege to be born and brought up at one of the leading yoga institute, Kaivalidham, Lonavala. And it's a great privilege for me to introduce today's speaker, Dr. Ramesh Bijlani ji, someone whom I admire a lot. Dr. Ramesh Bijlani ji is a unique combination. He's a medical doctor, scientist, educationist, expert in yoga and nutrition. He studied medicine at India's top institute, that is AIMS New Delhi, and he studied nutrition as world's top institute, MIT. He's a person who uses the gift of communication which he has received from the divine for touching the hearts and lives of his fellow beings. He turned towards integral yoga of Sri Aurobindo and the Mother in 1992. In the year 2000, he established at the All India Institute of Medical Science, New Delhi, where he was a professor, an integral health clinic for providing lifestyle modification courses based on yoga in tune with the latest developments in mind-body medicine. For those who are new to Sri Aurobindo and Mother, they are the modern days rishis who lived in the 20th century. Ramesh Bijlani sir has authored more than 200 scientific papers, more than 50 popular articles, more than 250 blogs on Speaking Tree website, and more than 75 books, including those on nutrition, yoga, spirituality, and education. Besides many children's books, among his various awards are an honorary doctorate in yoga by S. Vyasa University, Bangalore, and last year he has been awarded with Lifetime Achievement Swami Uvalyanand Puraskar from Kaivalidham Institute, Lonavala, for his contribution in the field of yoga. He has been staying at the Sri Aurobindo Ashram Delhi branch since 2006, where he conducts spiritual retreat, speaks, and continues to write. Dr. Bijlani calls himself a chemist who dispels small doses of love and wisdom from the inexhaustible pharmacy of Sri Aurobindo and the Mother. We are really thankful that, sir, you're here to bless us and to guide us on the topic Vedantic view of death in the light of Sri Aurobindo and the Mother. Over to you, sir. Sir, kindly unmute yourself. You're muted.
Sorry. Thank you, Sushant, for a very generous introduction. Just one small correction. I haven't written more than 75 books. I have written more than 25 books. Somehow 25 got altered to 75. The number now is around 30 books. The topic is death, particularly the Vedantic view, and that too in light of Sri Aurobindo and the Mother, which means that death is a subject that can be looked at in many ways. There can be many views, and the Vedantic view may be only one of them. Secondly, this is a subject which is shrouded in mystery because when we have a living person or a living creature, when it dies, there is necessarily something that escapes, that converts this living creature into what we call a dead body. And yet, what is it that escapes that we don't see? And that is what adds to the mystery. However, the rishis and the mystics, they have looked at these deep existential questions. One of them is also death, and have given plausible explanations to us based on their experience. In fact, when it comes to Vedanta, or for that matter, any Indian philosophy, the starting point is experience. The rishis and the mystics of the Indian tradition, when they started with some deep existential questions, they went on a personal quest and used primarily two methods: intense concentration and extreme degrees of self purification. And because they were concentrating on one issue in which they were passionately involved, many things which ordinarily appear very interesting, important, and essential to us started falling out of their lives. The result was that there was an extreme degree of simplification of life. And when life gets simplified to that extent, the needs are reduced to a bare minimum. And this forms a part of sort of the uh, conditions which make it easier to get answers to those questions. And these answers come not from the surroundings using our ordinary senses. They don't come as a result of intellectual excursions. They come from a source higher than the mind, higher than the intellect. And then some of these rishi, literally means the one who has seen. Seen what? Seen the highest truth, which we generally write with a capital T. So the one who, those who have seen this, or the rishis or the seers, some of them have chosen to write down their experiences in words. And when they decide to express it in words, the inspiration also seems to come from a higher source, because they don't have to sit and compose their experience uh, like a poet, or to write it like an ordinary writer from the intellect, using the intellect or the mind. They seem to become sort of unobstructed channels of words that flow into them from a higher source. As the mother has put it, that these words are heard by the heart and then translated by the head. And that is why these expressions have a mantric quality. They carry the power of the consciousness which the rishi was in when these words came to them. So that is what constitutes the scriptures like the Upanishads, which are the records of the rishis' experiences, which they received in this manner. Now, the various Upanishads, particularly, have been then used by some philosophers to come up with a coherent philosophy. So, philosophy in the Indian tradition comes after the experience. So, first the experience, and then it is knit into a philosophy into which these experiences can fit. And that is how we got Vedanta. And we can turn to the PowerPoint. I'll start first with what essentially Vedanta is, and then go on to the Vedantic view of death. Before I continue further, the love and blessings of the Mother and Sri Aurobindo to all of you from Sri Aurobindo Ashram Delhi branch. Now, what is Vedanta? It is a spiritual philosophy. It's a spiritual worldview. It's a way of looking at the world and all, in fact, the entire universe in terms of a view that is rooted in the experience of the rishis. And like all spiritual philosophies, it has these three basic features. Firstly, that the world or the universe, the material universe, is not an accident. It is the result of an intelligent design by a supremely intelligent being who has always been there and will always be there, and that is the Creator. Further, the spirit of the Creator pervades all creation. So the spirit of the creator is all pervasive throughout its creation. Then, having created the creation, the creator hasn't abandoned it. It plays an active role in running the creation, and for that, he has certain laws by which the creator runs the universe. To that, Sri Aurobindo and the mother have added something which may not be considered absolutely something exclusive to them, but certainly Sri Aurobindo has emphasized it more than other spiritual masters, and that is the idea of evolution. Just imagine the creator expressing itself as dead matter. The one who could one who knew everything and could do everything, becoming dead matter, which apparently can do nothing and seems to know nothing. So that's a great fall. But then the supreme consciousness of the creator, consciousness is knowing and doing both. The creator knows everything and can do everything. So this capacity to know and do, the consciousness of the creator, did not really disappear in its creation. The creation, which is a manifestation, that is a visible form of the creator itself in terms of Vedanta, has inherent in it the consciousness of the creator. It has not really disappeared. So matter also has consciousness, the same consciousness, but what matter expresses is an extremely small fraction of this supreme consciousness. And then came life. Now, life was a major leap in which a significantly higher fraction of the consciousness of the creator got manifested as compared to dead matter. So, the life force which living creatures have is because the matter in which this consciousness was completely sort of more or less hidden or dormant now is expressing itself through the phenomenon of life. And then came still the next step, that is creatures which had a mind. So matter, life, and mind, these are the three major steps that have expressed successively greater fractions of the supreme consciousness uh, inherent in all creation. But then the process of evolution has not stopped. Human being is the latest product of that evolution, the one whose mind is better developed than that of any creature that evolved so far. But the process has not stopped with human beings. Human being is the latest, but not the final product of evolution. However, human beings differ in one important way, and that is they have the urge to evolve further. That is, a human being need not die expressing the same fraction of the consciousness of the creator as the one with which he is born, which means that during its own lifetime, a human being can express a little more of the hidden consciousness of the creator. And this is what we call growth of consciousness, because through this process, the consciousness of that individual is growing to express more of the hidden consciousness of the creator. We also call it spiritual growth because the individual is growing in a direction that makes him more and more aware of the spirit which is not otherwise seen, that is the all pervasive presence of the creator in all creation. He becomes more and more aware of it and can organize his life around that awareness. So it's also called spiritual growth. So to grow spiritually or to grow in consciousness is an urge which is inherent in human beings. Not only is the urge there, there's also a capacity to grow in consciousness. There's a capacity to grow spiritually through the person's own efforts. So this is something which distinguishes human beings from all other creatures. That is, they have the urge to evolve and also the capacity to do so. Now, all manifestation, that is, all visible forms of the creation, that is, the divine or the creator becoming visible, manifesting in the form of its creation, all forms of creation are temporary. None of them is everlasting like the creator itself. But at the same time, because the spirit of the creator is all pervasive, and that is the essence of all creation, and that is eternal, one can say that all manifestation is temporary in its appearance, but it's eternal in its essence. And that is what death is about. That is, the manifestation is temporary, the individual is temporary, but the essence of the individual, which is the soul. Now, soul is individual, whereas the spirit is universal. That is the main difference between the spirit and the soul. So, this soul, which is the divine essence of the person, that is eternal, that is immortal. And this is something which we find in the Gita at many points, but particularly in chapter 2, verses 11 to 30, which are amongst the most widely quoted and particularly quoted to give consolation to someone whose near and dear one has died, that, well, the person is gone, but the soul of the person is eternal. So the person continues to live, and the person will come back again in another form, in a new dress. So it's like changing a dress and so on and so forth. All that occurs in these verses 11 to 30. I'll just read out one of them, the 27th verse, which says, Jatasya hi dhruvo mrityuh dhruvam janma mritasya cha tasmat apariharya arthe natvam shochitum arhasi. So, Jatasya hi dhruvo mrityu, the one who is born, for him, death is a certainty. Dhruvam janma mritasya cha, in the same way, certain is the birth of the one who has died, which means that the soul will get embodied again and return to the earth. Tasmat apariharya arthe, and therefore, for something which is inevitable, that is, death is something inevitable. For something inevitable, natvam shochitum arasi, you need not grieve, you need not feel any sorrow because of something that is inevitable. Now, this is something which is easy to accept on the basis of our observations, that anyone who is born will die. The other part is not so obvious, but that we have to accept on the basis of the Rishi's experiences. And also, as we shall see a little later briefly, that to some extent it is seems to be a spiritual necessity to be reborn. Uh, but the important thing is not that the person who has come to this world or who is born must die one day. The important thing is what is it that the person does in the interval between the two.
Go.
What is the interval? What is it that we do during the interval between birth and death? That is what is important. And that is what determines to what extent we would fulfill the purpose of life. The purpose of life is something that is unique to human beings, and that is to evolve in consciousness. And to put it very simply, to die as a better person than as we are born. Now, that is the purpose of life. And a life which is properly utilized will take as many steps in that direction as possible. The culmination of this point would be the point at which one expresses almost completely the hidden divine consciousness. That is, the hidden divinity is manifested almost fully. And that would be the individual who will be full of love for all his fellow beings, because he would not see them as different, he would see them as himself. So the type of division which the ego barrier creates would disappear and would get replaced by love. Love is the antidote to the ego. Ego is a dividing principle, love is a uniting principle. So as a result of spiritual growth, the ego tends to diminish, love tends to go up. But then the culmination of this process would be in the expansion of the ego to such an extent that it seems to disappear completely. Because if a circle grows very big to include everything, all creation, then naturally the circle disappears. And instead, it gets replaced by love, which is again infinite in nature. In the sense, it is universal, it is not restricted to a few, uh, and it is unconditional. It doesn't depend upon the object of love fulfilling certain conditions, because uh, the love is based on a deeper truth of being manifestations of the same divine, and therefore there being a oneness rather than a division. And that basic fact is not altered by the superficial features which we sometimes use as conditions for loving. And then this is a love in which there's no expectation in return. No expectation in return, because the one who has the consciousness which is almost completely manifesting the divinity does not need anything. And if the person does not need anything, naturally he does not have to expect anything in return. So that is the growth. But then this journey from the point at which most of us are in this life, to the point at which we will have all our life organized around this sense of oneness, is a long journey. And this long journey may or may not be completed in a lifetime. For most of us, in fact, does not get the journey does not get over in a lifetime. And that is what makes rebirth a necessity. Because what it means is that the journey that was covered in this life uh, is not a waste. And when the person's soul comes back again in the next life, there's a head start based on the work done in the previous life. So the person takes off from the point at which he left in the previous life. So that is what makes rebirth a spiritual necessity. Now, one might say that this may be related to one of the common sayings that do the good, die young. Because if someone has grown spiritually so much in a particular life that there's very little more of the journey yet to be covered, then this person is an extremely good person, but needs just a few finishing strokes in another life to complete the journey. So if a person arrives in that form, then he may not need to live long in this difficult world, and therefore he may die young. And what does he do uh, uh, to furnish those finishing strokes by which the journey is completed? He provides an opportunity for the parents to grow spiritually. Because it's when a young person dies, the parents are generally still alive, and the parents are shattered. Now they're shattered, but at the same time there's no alternative but to accept what has happened. And in the process of acceptance of the illness of the young one, the death of the young one, uh, they grow spiritually more than they would in several decades of ordinary life. So, to provide an opportunity for the spiritual growth of at least the parents and many others around them, many other near and dear ones, this young person has done something. This person has done something which will make this young person also grow spiritually, and that's what can provide those finishing strokes. And apart from that, if he does not die very young, say not as an infant, but lives at least a few decades of life, then he'll have plenty of opportunities to do a lot of good deeds to others, to work with a certain attitude, to express his love by giving something to many of those around him. So all these things he'll be able to do, and uh, when he doesn't need to stay anymore, then maybe the person will die. Now, this means that if a person has to live long, does it mean that the person has to be bad? Uh, this is a question which was posed to me recently by someone who had lost her husband to COVID, and then the husband was not very old, and many well wishers came and consoled them by saying that the good die young. Now, this lady's child asked this question, that does it mean that if my father had not been so good, if he had been a little bad, he would have lived longer? Now, this is logical, but that doesn't mean that if something is true, the reverse will always be true. Firstly, I mean, let's accept that what uh, this does is to provide consolation to those who have lost a near and dear one at a young age. So it's more of a polite expression, an expression which provides consolation and solace. But then there is also a spiritual rationale why this might actually happen that we have seen. But there is an equally valid rationale also for the fact that someone who is good may live a long life. That can also be explained on the basis of the same philosophy, because it is only by having a longer time in this world that the person will be able to stimulate the spiritual growth of others around him. So it is for the sake of the others that this person needs to have a longer life, because uh, the shorter the life, the less he can do for others. And that is why, even when the journey has been completed, the person can still come back to the world. It's not that even after completing the journey, he doesn't have to come back. Now, one of the questions that is sometimes raised is that if a person knows that in any case I will be reborn, does that not make the person complacent? That I need not do much in this life, in any case, I'll get another opportunity. Now, if one keeps talking like that in every life, then no progress will be made. And therefore, rebirth is not something which should make us complacent. That is not why uh, it happens to be there. Rebirth is there to not make us impatient, not make us feel that if the journey will not be completed in this life, then why embark on the journey at all? It gives us the assurance that the journey will be completed one day. The ultimate destiny of all human beings is the same, and uh, we will all get there. But the important thing is that at least we try and take as many steps as possible in the right direction in this life. Because if we keep treating every life as something which is not to be properly used because we'll get another opportunity, then life after life we can go on wasting our lives. In fact, to some extent, we do that also, because it is when a human being is just evolving on this spiritual journey, has just started, say, after having been an animal in a previous life, when he is born as a human being for the first time, then he is not conscious of his unique role. And in fact, why only the first time? Majority of mankind, as Sri Aurobindo says, lives at the level of the body and the emotions, body and the emotional part of the being, and a little bit of the ordinary mind, which uses logic in a rather primitive and crude fashion to that, and that is added to the uh, physical and the emotional level. And that is how most human beings live, without any uh, consciousness of the ultimate purpose of life, without doing anything very actively in that direction. So, lots of lives are more or less wasted, with a little progress being made willy nilly, accidentally, uh, through a haphazard process of trial and error. It is only after a certain degree of evolution has been achieved that the person becomes conscious, becomes aware of the true purpose of life. An analogy which I sometimes give to explain this is that imagine a tree to which a person has been tied, and with a rope, and the rope is extremely long. The one end of the rope, with one end of the rope, the person is tied up, the other end is tied to the tree, but then behind the tree, this rope is in the hands of someone whom this person cannot see. Now, what this being behind the tree is doing is pulling the rope slowly so that the rope is gradually getting shorter. Now, to start with, the rope is extremely long, and therefore the individual feels that I can do whatever I want. He runs around, he has a total free will to do whatever he wants, and he feels that, I have this free will, I can do whatever I want. He doesn't realize that he's tied to a rope, and the rope is uh, in the hands of somebody who's behind a tree, and so on, all that he can't see. But then there comes a point at which the rope becomes a little short. And then he finds that if he tries to run too far away, then there is a certain stretch that is felt. And it is only by moving towards the tree that that stretch can be relieved. And he starts enjoying the process of going towards the tree. The tree offers a certain attraction, which he doesn't find in running around here and there. And that is when the process of consciously pursuing the process of spiritual growth begins. And then the person has still the free will, but he's quite happy not to run around too much, but take a few active steps, in fact, in the direction of the tree. Now, what happens at the end of the journey? That is the journey of the soul, which keeps returning life after life. What happens at the end of the journey is, traditionally, sometimes it is said that at the end of the journey, the person has evolved to such an extent that the person need not come back to this world again, because the person has started expressing the hidden consciousness of the divine almost completely, and therefore the person need not come back at all. And that is what sometimes is called moksha. But then Sri Aurobindo says that that is not essential. The person can still choose to come back even if it is not necessary, because that is how he'll be able to help others in this world, firstly. Secondly, he can also enjoy the stay in the world without feeling the sense of sorrow or entanglement which we normally feel. Because now this person will be able to look at the entire happenings of the world and the material universe from a higher plane. Now his consciousness is such that he is looking at it from a plane where all the things which appear so difficult and terrible in this world make no difference to him. So he has a certain uh, degree of equanimity, which is born of a level of consciousness at which none of these things matter. And therefore, he can enjoy that blissful experience of observing the world from a higher plane, apart from being able to help others. So he may still choose to come back. Well, when it comes to moksha, that is when a person need not come back, although he may, but he need not. Uh, Many are those who want moksha because they feel, well, this world is full of sorrow and misery and suffering. How nice it would be if we go to some other world after death, and after that never need to come back again. But then what we forget is that that will not happen through wishful thinking. That will happen only if we complete at least part of the journey as much as we can in this life. So this life is not to be wasted, that moksha will come as a result of the contributions made in a number of lives, of which this life also happens to be one. So any steps that we take in the right direction, that is to evolving in consciousness in this life, has repercussions in this life, because that is what makes our life uh, here also much happier and healthier, and gives us a sense of fulfillment. Doesn't mean that the person will not have any difficulties or problems in this life. He will have plenty of them, but he'll be able to look at them from a higher plane, he'll be able to use those difficulties also as opportunities for spiritual growth, opportunities for fulfilling the purpose of life. So that is how this person will have a much better time, which means that he will discover the key to happiness, which is completely independent of external circumstances. Now, complete independence from external circumstances, that is the type of food the person eats, the type of clothes the person wears, the type of house in which he lives, the type of furniture he has in the house, the school to which his children go, the person he gets married to, how his partner behaves, how people behave at the workplace. Now, whether his work at the workplace is sufficiently recognized. Now, these are all things which are external circumstances. His happiness will no longer depend upon any of these. And any type of freedom or independence, that is becoming independent of external circumstances, is also a moksha. So one can have moksha right here in this world, in this life, as a result of living life in a certain way. Further, because the person has evolved in consciousness as a result of living that type of a life in which his happiness is getting more and more independent of external circumstances, uh, he qualifies for a better world after death, because the soul also has to inhabit somewhere, and there are different gradations of the other worlds in which these souls which leave this world go and inhabit. What we loosely call heaven and hell. Yes, there is something like hell and there's something like heaven. That's what the seers tell us. And there are many other worlds in between these two extremes. So, which of these worlds the soul goes and settles in will depend upon the way this life has been lived. So, the way this life is lived determines our happiness in this life. It determines where the soul will inhabit after death, and it will also determine the type of conditions and circumstances the person gets when the soul gets embodied again and returns to this earth, because those conditions and circumstances will be more and more such that, firstly, they'll be comfortable, secondly, they'll be more conducive to spiritual growth, which means that just wishing for moksha and doing nothing about it will not achieve anything. On the other hand, working towards that moksha will give us something in this life, in this world. It will give us something in the other worlds where we inhabit after the after death, and it will also give us something when we return to this world, a head start, so that one starts with that and has a better chance of completing the journey in subsequent lives. In other words, death is a necessity. It is a necessity because the body mind complex that we have, which is our instrument for action in the world, which we use for spiritual growth, has limitations. It cannot last forever. It grows frail, and beyond a point, it becomes too unfit for doing anything which may be required for spiritual growth. And therefore, it's a physical necessity. But along with that, it's also a spiritual necessity, because we need to leave in order to be able to come back again, get a fresh set of circumstances, get a fresh body mind complex, and continue the journey from where it was left off. So, the death is both a physical necessity because of the limitations of the body mind complex. It is also a spiritual necessity because the journey has to be completed. Not only that, the mother has also pointed out that if man were assured of total immortality, man was assured of immortality in this life, in this world, then in fact the world will become a much worse place. Whatever good we do, which leads to our spiritual growth, not only helps us take a few steps in the right direction, a few steps towards the fulfillment of the purpose of life, uh, it also happens because we know our time in this world is limited. And that is why if a person gets an incurable disease like cancer, we find that the person who has that sort of an opening towards spiritual growth who has put in enough work in the previous lives to have that conscious sort of a aspiration to grow spiritually, one finds that after getting an incurable disease, the person grows more within the few years that the person has than in several decades of ordinary life. So, death is not the end, death is a sort of a station, a milestone in a long journey of the soul. Death is also an opportunity because it gives us an opportunity to come back again and get a fresh set of circumstances, a fresh body mind complex. It's quite often said that life is an illusion. In fact, life is not an illusion, it's very real. It's meant for participation. We should embrace life and participate in it and make full use of it. It is death which is an illusion because we feel death is the end. It is not the end, it is only a station, a milestone. It's therefore death looking like an end is an illusion. It is only a milestone in the journey of the soul, the journey which will continue life after life. Fear of death is some more or less universal, and as the mother has said, of all fears, the most subtle and the most tenacious is the fear of death. Now, how can one overcome this fear? The key to it is knowledge. And this is something which Patanjali has told us in his famous sutra, Avidya, Smita, Ragadvesh, Abhinivesha, Klesha. That is the basic sources of all stress are avidya and asmita. And the kleshas listed by him are one of them is abhinivesha, which is the fear of death. Now, knowledge, actually, avidya is the source of these kleshas or including fear of death. And therefore, the solution will be the opposite of avidya, that is vidya. Now, vidya is not the type of knowledge which one can get in a school or college. That is what we call gyan. Gyan is different from vidya. Vidya is the knowledge of the deeper truths of existence. The rishis have had the experience. We may not have the experience, or we may have the experience only in glimpses, experience only which is indirect rather than direct. But certainly we can uh, believe in the experiences of the rishis. And even if we have this knowledge partly only at the mental level and not entirely at the level of the experience, experience may be only in terms of a few glimpses and some indirect conclusions. Even if it is that, that helps us in overcoming the fear of death. Because then we realize that we as an individual are only a small little cog in a giant wheel. While we are here, we have a certain role to play, not only for our own spiritual evolution, which is the purpose of human life, but in the universe as a whole. We have come with a certain purpose, but then neither is our contribution indispensable, nor is it a contribution which is being made for the first and the last time. Many others have contributed a lot before us, many others will continue to contribute after us, and through that fulfill the purpose of their lives. We are also one more being who has come in this fashion. So we start seeing ourselves as just one little drop in a vast ocean. And we don't feel that, well, I'm indispensable. If I'm not around, then how will this project be completed? How will this work be done? If I'm not around, who will take care of my children? I have so many responsibilities, and so on and so forth. Now, for none of these things, we are indispensable. And that helps a lot in overcoming the fear of death. Nothing will collapse, everything will go on, even when we are not around. Now, coming to this rather well known mantra, the Mrityunjay mantra, which is very often recited around patients. And the expectation is that by reciting this, the person may get cured of the disease and live longer. But in fact, uh, that is not what this mantra is for. This mantra gives us both sides of the issue. One, that while we live, we should be in good health and we should spread fragrance around. But at the same time, we realizing that we cannot become immortal, we're not asking for immortality. All the seeker is asking for is that I should be able to live effortlessly. Effortlessly means without clinging to life and without fear of death, without prolonging existence unnecessarily and unduly, without trying to cling to life. Exactly in the same way as a ripe fruit, when it is ripe, it just drops effortlessly. So the prayer is to the three-eyed God, Shiva, uh, the source of fragrance and strength. But then the same God is also being prayed for, that being in this world is a type of a bondage. I should be able to get free from that bondage in the same effortless manner as a ripe fruit, a cucumber, for example, falls, and it is that liberation that I'm asking, not liberation from my perishability. I know I am perishable and I'm not going to last forever, but when the time comes, I should be able to live effortlessly. Suggested readings: The Life Divine, which is Sri Aurobindo's spiritual experiences, and also a masterly rationalization of all deeper truths of existence. One of the things one learns from this book is how to be rational, how to make a case using the faculty of reasoning. Sometimes he makes a very beautiful case using the faculty of reasoning, even for those with whom he does not agree. And therefore, it tells us that the other type of point of view, which does exist and which is pretty common, is also based on rational grounds. And he makes out that case better than his opponents would. But then, having done that, then he says, but. Then comes the but, in which he starts saying that where is the flaw? And therefore, how is it that we can avoid that flaw by another type of reasoning? By And that's why his point of view is different. Uh, we find all this in poetic language and to some extent in a simpler language in Savitri, which is a poem of more than 24,000 lines. And the chapter which gives this in a sort of a condensed form in Savitri is Book 1, Canto 4, The Secret Knowledge. And if you find Sri Aurobindo too intimidating to start with, then here is a simpler book, Understanding Spirituality and Living It 24/7. This is another book which has more than 250 essays, each about two pages or so on an average, on this type of topics that we have discussed today, including death, soul, rebirth, Vedanta, etc. On each of these, you'll find, on an average, essays of 2 pages each, besides many more topics which are commonly associated with spirituality. This book is not yet available in print, but it is available for free download on this website, yesspirituality.wordpress.com. This is a picture postcard view of Sri Aurobindo Ashram Delhi branch, to which you are all welcome. And these are two YouTube channels where you'll find plenty of material which may be of interest to you. The YouTube channel of Sri Aurobindo Ashram Delhi branch, and the YouTube channel of an totally online platform which started during COVID. And this platform is called Yes Spirituality. Yes stands for yoga, education, and spirituality. And the same S serves for yes and also for spirituality. For any questions or comments, or even otherwise, just to stay in touch, you may drop an email to me. The email is simple: rambagework@gmail.com. RM for Ramesh, BIJ for Bijlani, work to indicate I hardly work. rambagework@gmail.com. Gratitude to the master and the mother for making this session possible. And thank you all for being there.
For this talk that very beautifully you have presented. That universe is not an accident, but a beautiful creation. And the creator knows everything and can do everything. You pointed out the quote from Bhagavad Gita, the second chapter, 27 shlok, that the one who is born, his or her death is certain, and anyone who dies has to be reborn. So death is inevitable. We should not have grief. The journey done in this life never goes in vain. It always gives us a head start for the next life. And you also made it very clear that Gyan and Vidya are different. And the further readings on Savitri and Life Divine. Thank you, sir, for this beautiful presentation. If there are any questions, sir, can we take any questions? Sir, you are muted. Sir, you are muted.
I have a question, if we could take questions.
Sir, can we take a question?
What I was saying was, I have no problem, but so long as the organizers uh, don't mind the session going on beyond 1 hour.
So we do not have any problem. It's always lovely to hear you.
Okay.
Kananji?
Thank you so much. That was so profound and very well articulated. So I really appreciate it. Now I'm going to go visit the Delhi, ashram for sure. My question is, in reincarnation, like if you have a dog, your beloved dog, can the dog ever be a human in the next life, or does it always come back as an animal? Because I get mixed answers to this question in reincarnation. But I did hear that humans only come back as humans.
Yes, the usual dogma is that human beings come back only as humans, but dogs can evolve into human beings. And not only that, the fact that we feel that uh, only human beings have certain capacities to evolve and uh, qualities which we consider to be spiritual qualities may be partly the pride of the species that we have, because animals sometimes display some wonderful qualities, and particularly dogs. And that's why we also have in mythology the instance of Yudhishthir having a very faithful dog who accompanied him all the way to heaven. And uh, he insisted that if the dog is not allowed, even he would not like to go to heaven without the dog. And eventually the dog found its way there.
Thank you very much for that explanation.
We can take one more question. Seems there are no
I have a
questions.
question.
Okay, Dr. Mamta, yes, you can ask.
I'm not able to switch on my camera, but I want to ask, uh, like, like we say that after a certain number of births and deaths, we eventually are not reborn after we reach the place we're supposed to reach. Um, so, is there anything said anywhere about what would happen to the universe after all human beings finish this journey? Um, and then what happens next?
Uh, so, what is the question? Is there anything said about?
About what happens after all human beings have, like, after a certain point, after all human beings have reached the place where they are not reborn anymore.
And that
So
actually is
does that mean
unlike.
that a species will go extinct after that?
No, that is unlikely to happen because the spectrum of consciousness, human consciousness, is extremely wide, and therefore everybody reaching that point simultaneously is extremely unlikely. Sri Aurobindo has visualized a world uh, a, in which there will be a significant jump in the level of consciousness in the near future. And for that, he has also postulated another new principle beyond the mind, which will evolve. So, just as there have been three steps so far: body, life, and mind, the fourth step in evolution will be the evolution of the supermind. Now, supermind is not just a superior type of mind, it is a new principle in evolution altogether. And it is only in that stage of evolution that the concept of division will be completely abolished and be replaced totally by a sense of oneness. But then he has also said that uh, that doesn't mean that the present type of human beings will disappear at that stage. It's just that this numbers of the new type of creation and number of human beings with a distinctly higher level of consciousness, their number will increase so much that the world will become a much better place to live in. But the those who are at the lower level of consciousness will continue to be there, just as the evolution of human beings has not meant that the animals have disappeared. In the same way, the appearance of individuals with very high levels of consciousness, including those who are at the supramental level, will not mean that human beings of the type that we have now will become extinct. They'll also continue to be there. In fact, that is the beauty of this planet, Earth, where good and evil, or a wide spectrum of consciousness, coexists. And that is, in fact, if you think a little more deeply, you'll realize that is what makes evolution possible. Because unless you have that contrast, there is no stimulus for evolution. And that is why evolution is not possible in the other worlds where there is a sort of a segregation. The people with a certain level of consciousness, they all go to a certain world, so they are all at the same level. They can live in harmony, but if they're at a high level of consciousness, they're all living in harmony, but there is no stimulus for further spiritual growth. So that is why even after living at in those some of those nice realms which we call heaven-like realms, a person ultimately decides to come back to this world again to evolve still more, to qualify for a still higher realm in the other worlds. So, because that evolution is possible only on Earth, and that is possible because good and evil and everything in between coexists on this Earth, which means that a very wide spectrum of consciousness exists, and everything can sort of coexist at the same place.
Thank you, Mamta ji, for that beautiful question and beautiful answer by Bijlani sir. So one question from Shweta ji that I also resonate with is, I can intellectually understand these teachings, can be challenging to apply. How to deal with immense grief? Can one continue to connect with soul for deeper healing?
That's a good question, and it is a universal problem. Uh, those of us who are knowledge oriented, for them the starting point can be knowledge, but that should only be a starting point. Uh, from knowledge, one should move to practice. And as one moves from knowledge to practice, one becomes more and more conscious of the knowledge practice gap. That we are not able to practice everything that we know. But even the part that we practice generates some experience. And that experience uh, then becomes a topic for a subject for reflection. So that provides the material for reflection. And as a result of that reflection, the chances are that practice then improves. And then that practice, improved practice, now becomes the subject for another reflection. So that's how the practice keeps improving and the knowledge practice gap keeps getting narrower. So, in other words, the both types of work going on simultaneously, outer work and inner work. So, the outer work is the effort to put the knowledge into practice. The inner work is to reflect to what extent it was put into practice, how much of the gap still exists, how can I close this gap further. So, that is inner work. And that inner work then finds an outlet in further expression or outer work. So, inner work helps in improving the outer work, and the outer work provides material for reflection, which will help in further improving the outer work. So, inner work and outer work, they both complement each other. And to some extent, this inner work is what can happen during meditation.
Thank you once again, sir, for these beautiful answers and this beautiful session. I thank you once again on behalf of all of us, on behalf of hellomyyoga, and to all the participants for actively participating in today's session. Thank you. Namaste.
Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity.